Welcome back to another episode of No Shame with Shane, where the takes have no lies, no bias, but most importantly, no shame. I'm your host, Shane Fordham. Now, I really don't even want to talk about this Giants game, bro. I really don't. Like, there's just, it's honestly, I needed a couple days just to even calm myself down. I really don't even want to talk about it. But if there's, if there's one thing that stuck out to me about this Giants game, first, it's just how valuable Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell are to this defense. Like, without Jalen Carter, without Quinion Mitchell, this defense is a totally different defense. Like, this defense went from looking like one of the best defenses in the NFL, you know, when they're at their best, one of the elite defenses in the NFL, to then in 1 week looking like arguably the worst defense in the NFL. It just, I mean, without Jalen Carter, obviously the defensive line is not the same. You know, they don't have the same effectiveness at collapsing the pocket and putting pressure on a quarterback. And then Lord knows how bad the secondary is without Quinion Mitchell. You know, without Quinion Mitchell, you now have two holes at both cornerback positions. You know, and it just makes it easier for an opposing passing game to just pick it apart. So without Jalen Carter and without Quinion Mitchell, this defense is honestly a totally different defense the way it is constructed right now, and it's really concerning to see. You know, Jalen Carter, like we saw in this game, how valuable Jalen Carter is to this defensive line. We saw how valuable Jalen Carter is to this defensive line against the Cowboys in Week 1. You know, having that sudden suspension he did, or not suspension, having that sudden disqualification that he had, you know, not being able to play a down. The D line, it's like the D line couldn't do anything to get Dak Prescott on the ground against the Giants. The D line couldn't do anything to create consistent pressure on Jackson Dart. There was nothing this D line could do against the Giants. There was nothing this D-line could do to consistently create pressure on Jackson Dart. The D-line, or the defense as a whole, had 2 sacks on Jackson Dart, which could have easily been 5 with Jalen Carter on the field. Without Jalen Carter, there's no one on the D-line who attracts fear from an opposing offense. There's no one on the D-line that warrants a double team. Jordan Davis doesn't necessarily warrant a double team yet. There's no, you know, Nolan Smith. We haven't seen Nolan Smith we haven't really seen Nolan Smith. Zadarius Smith is now retired. Our best pass rusher, a guy who was being close to warranting a double team, we now no longer have. He is checked out of the season. So there's no one without Jalen Carter. There's no one on this D line that warrants a double team. Offenses don't fear Azeez Ojulari. Offenses don't fear Josh Uche. Offenses don't fear Moro Ojomo. You know, it's just without Jalen Carter, there was no fear factor on this defensive line, and it makes it easier for an offensive line to create a solid protection around their quarterback. The D line that was supposed to be among the best D lines in the NFL at this point in the season struggled creating pressure against an offensive line that was one of the worst. So if our D-line struggled against an offensive line that is supposed to be one of the worst O-lines in the NFL, it's time to be concerned. It is time to be concerned. Like, without Jalen Carter, Jackson Dart had all day to throw the football. He had all day to throw the football. And when we did put pressure on him, when we did kind of collapse the pocket and force him to one side or force him to move around back there, we couldn't get a hand on him. Nobody on that D-line could get a hand on him. This D-line, the Eagles D-line without Jalen Carter, made Jackson Dart look like prime Patrick Mahomes, the way he was maneuvering in the backfield. Now, Jackson Dart had a great game. I got to hand it to him. He was confident. He was comfortable in the pocket. He was poised. He had patience. You know, he kept his body in the pocket when he needed to keep his body in the pocket. He evaded when he needed to evade. Just all his just instincts, ability, his accuracy. Jackson Dart had a great game. I got to hand it to him. But our D line made him look even better than what he is. The Eagles' defensive line made Jackson Dart look better than what he is. They helped Jackson Dart have an even better game than what he would have had or what he could have had. It's just this D line, the D line really did no favors for the defense as a whole in this game against the Giants. And that starts with the absence of Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter is where it starts and ends for this D line. And that's a problem. The fact that this D line can't do anything, can't create any pressure, has trouble, has issues stopping the run, even with Jordan Davis. The fact that this D line struggles this much without Jalen Carter is a problem. And it's something that needs to be addressed, especially with Zadarius Smith now being retired. You look at the secondary. Soon as Quinion Mitchell went out, I knew it was a wrap. As soon as Quinion Mitchell went out and left the game, I knew it was a wrap because that meant Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson had to be on the field at the same time. That's when the game was over. Was when Quinion Mitchell went out. With the way the offense was playing, which again was just bad across the board. With the way the offense was playing, no Quinion Mitchell meant open season for Jackson Dart in this passing game. Meant open season really for Jackson Dart in the run game. Because it not having Quinion Mitchell really put Vic Fangio and the defense in a bind because Vic Fangio now has to adapt. He knows he has liabilities now at both corner positions, which means he has to have more help over top to give those guys some insurance, which now takes away from that front five to front six group, which is what helped Cam Skattebo take advantage and just dominate in the run game. Like, not having Quinion Mitchell made it easier for Cam Skattebo to expose this defense the way he did. Not having Jalen Carter made it easier for Cam Skattebo to expose the defense the way he did. It was just bad. But not having Quinion Mitchell obviously forced the Eagles to have Adoree and Keely Ringo on the field at the same time, which is rarely going to be a formula for success. No, honestly, never. It's never going to be a formula for success. The cornerback duo we had playing on the field for a majority of the game, and Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson, that's got to be the worst DB duo in the NFL right now. It's got to be. You can't name one DB duo that is worse than Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson. You can't name one that's worse right now. Keely Ringo made Jalen Hyatt look like prime Odell. I thought it was Keely Ringo being out there. You would have thought the Giants re-signed Odell, brought him back to New York, and gave him his old number back. That's how bad Keely Ringo looked. Imagine if Malik Neighbors was healthy. Like, it honestly looked awful. And I'm honestly, if Quinion Mitchell, depending on when Quinion Mitchell comes back, I know he's not supposed to, it doesn't seem like he's supposed to be out for an extended amount of time, but the cornerback depth right now is a real issue. I think the edge rusher problem is worse, especially without Zadarius Smith, but the cornerback depth is a close second. After Quinion Mitchell, there's no corner on the squad that is able to supplement a coverage. Like, there's no corner on this depth chart that is able to hold their own alongside Quinion Mitchell. It's an easy target for offenses. Like, it's an easy target, an easy hole to attack in this defense. It's really disappointing, especially with what we saw last year, with flashes from Isaiah Rodgers, who's obviously now a Viking, who I hold in high standing. Flashes from Keely Ringo when he was on the field. And then, we obviously had one of the best corner duos in the NFL with Quinion Mitchell and a veteran Darius Slay, Pro Bowl, All-Pro corner. It's a huge difference we're seeing from last year to this year. Where last year, the cornerback position was one of the main strengths for this Eagles team, to now this year being their biggest weakness. Arguably their biggest weakness. It's a very, very concerning thing to see from a team that is still in a team that is supposed to be fighting for another Super Bowl this year. It's very concerning. Now, again, this game just showed me how important Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell are. It just showed me how important they are and honestly how good they are at their position. The fact that Jalen Carter is so good of a defensive tackle that he makes everyone on the D-line better because of the attention he attracts from an offensive line says something. Says something about who he is as a player. The fact that Quinion Mitchell is so good as a corner that he can make Adoree Jackson and Keely Ringo look slightly better as corners, giving them a little bit of, the fact that Quinion Mitchell makes the secondary look as good as it does when he's on the field says something about Quinion Mitchell's ability. Says something about who Quinion Mitchell is as a coverage corner, whether it's in man or zone. Just an all-around corner. The fact that Quinion Mitchell and Jalen Carter have the impact on this unit that they do, it just shows how good they are as players. Just shows how irreplaceable they are and how important they are for the future of this defense. It's honestly concerning. And, I used to think Zach Bond was the best player on the defense. I used to think he was the best or the most important player on the defense. Zach Bond is important. Don't get me wrong. Aside from this Giants game, Zach Bond is always going to show up on the stat sheet. He's a guy that's always going to be present. He's always going to be visible, in terms of making a play. But he's not the most important player on this defense. The most important players on this defense are Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell. Because they both, even though Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell may not show up on the stat sheet as often as Zach Bond does, where Zach Bond, he'll have multiple games with 10 or more tackles, 10 or more solo tackles. He'll have an interception. He'll have a sack. He might have a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. Even though Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell don't show up on the stat sheet like Zach Bond does, they are more important to this defense than Zach Bond is because of the way this defense looks when they are not on the field. Like, Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell are more important to the defense than Zach Bond is because of the factor plays that they make that don't show up on the stat sheet. Like Jalen Carter being on that D-line, attracting the double teams that he does, freeing up other guys on the D-line to make plays or to put pressure on the quarterback, putting pressure on the quarterback himself. I can't tell you how many times Jalen Carter is inches away from getting a sack. I can't tell you how many, a lot of Jalen Carter's QB hits could easily be sacks. But his QB hits lead to forced incompletions, lead to TFLs. Like, Jalen Carter's factor plays allow for other guys on this defense to make plays. Quinion Mitchell's factor plays allow for other guys on the secondary to make plays. Quinion Mitchell's coverage forces a quarterback to hold on to the ball longer to allow the Zach Bond and Jahad Campbell to get in better positions to make plays in the pocket, to make plays up front. Quinion Mitchell's coverage forces quarterbacks to hold on to the ball a little longer, which gives the D-line more time to get to him, more time to rattle him in the pocket. Zach Bond will always show up on the stat sheet, but that doesn't make him the most important player on this defense. Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell are the most important players on this defense because of what they do that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Jalen Carter's impact and Quinion Mitchell's impact help Zach Bond to succeed as well. Now, Zach Bond is an elite linebacker. He is one of the most important players on this defense, but he is not the most important player on this defense. But at the same time, you do need a guy like Zach Bond. Having a guy like Zach Bond who does show up on the stat sheet as often as he does, the way he does, is important. It's very important. But Zach Bond is not more of an important presence than that of Jalen Carter and Quinion Mitchell because of what they do behind the scenes that will soon transition to the stat sheet. You know, so, but then also another thing that's hurting the squad right now is not having Landon Dickerson. No Landon Dickerson, looking at the offensive side of the ball, not having Landon Dickerson is killing the offense because of how one-dimensional the scheme is right now. Like best case scenario, not having Landon Dickerson, like Landon Dickerson being absent should not be hurting the offense this much. Not having Landon Dickerson should not hurt the run game this much. But it's hurting, Landon Dickerson's absence is hurting the offense this much because of how one-dimensional the offense is playing right now. Because of how one-dimensional Kevin Patullo's scheme is right now. The basic nature of this offense, is hurting the team so much. Or Landon Dickerson's absence is hurting the offense so much because of the basic nature of this offense. If this offense wasn't as one-dimensional as it is, we wouldn't be feeling the sting of no Landon Dickerson at this level. Saquon Barkley wouldn't be struggling as much to find run lanes and to find those home runs that he was able to find last year if this offense had a little bit more of a complexity. But the offense is basic. It's one-dimensional, which is why not having an all-pro, Pro Bowl guard like Landon Dickerson is killing the offense. That's why it's having the effect that it is having right now. It's why the run game is struggling. It's why Jalen Hurts is having issues connecting with A.J. Brown. It's just all across the board. Not having Landon Dickerson is also something that is hurting the squad. Now, Landon Dickerson is important. Don't get me wrong. Landon Dickerson, arguably the best guard in the NFL, one of the best overall offensive linemen in the NFL. But with how talented this O-line is as a whole, with an offensive line that still has Cam Jurgens, that still has the best tackle duo in Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, with an offensive line that really has a Tyler Steen, that is in rotation right now, the way he's been playing, the way he's been holding up, with an offensive line that has the talent that it does, it should not be struggling this much without Landon Dickerson. The only reason the offensive line and the run game is struggling this much is because of how one-dimensional Kevin Patullo's offensive scheme is. That's the only reason. Kevin Patullo's offensive scheme is so bad, it's making our all-pros, our Pro Bowl guys, our playmakers look awful. It's so bad, it's making everyone else on the or almost everyone else on the field look bad. Like, Jalen Hurts looked bad against the Giants. Saquon Barkley looked bad against the Giants. A.J. Brown did not look good against the Giants. A.J. Dillon did not look good against the Giants. Kevin Patullo's offensive scheme is ruining our skill players. Kevin Patullo's offensive scheme is doing more to hurt our skill players, is doing more to contain our skill players than what any other defense in the NFL is capable of doing. That's our biggest enemy this year is the play calling. But, looking at the trade deadline, with the trade deadline coming up, we have several issues across the board right now that need addressing. But whatever happens at this trade deadline, do not trade AJ Brown. Now, I've been hearing this all week. Oh, the Eagles need to trade AJ Brown. They don't know how to use him. They might as well get something for him. That's the dumbest thing I've ever. Trading AJ Brown is the dumbest trade suggestion I've ever heard. There is no good that the Eagles get out of trading AJ Brown. There's no trade package that the Eagles will get in return that is worth trading AJ Brown. Trading AJ Brown could be possibly the dumbest decision that Howie Roseman in this front office could make this season. It doesn't, like, you're going to trade AJ Brown because your offensive coordinator doesn't know how to use him. That's like giving a Lamborghini away because I don't have a license, or I need to get my license renewed. That's like transitioning to a bike because my license is expired. Just renew the license. Get someone in there that actually knows how to call plays. Get a play caller in there who actually knows how to feed an all-pro caliber, Hall of Fame caliber, multi-talented receiver like AJ Brown. Trading AJ Brown could quite possibly be the worst move of the season out of any team in the NFL if the Eagles go through with that decision. Do not trade AJ Brown. They're trading AJ Brown. If you think this offense looks bad right now, trading AJ Brown would make them look even worse. Trading AJ Brown would be so much of a setback for this offense, especially after all the time that went in this offseason, all the development and the work that Jalen put in this offseason, the chemistry that Jalen and AJ put in, the dynamic between Devontae Smith, the production that Devontae Smith is able to have. Trading AJ Brown throws everything off for this offensive unit. Trading AJ Brown would do more to hurt this offense than to benefit this offense. Trading AJ Brown would be a setback and not a setup for success. The dumbest thing to do would be to trade away the best receiver in the NFL. The priority for this Eagles team, or what should be their priority for this Eagles team this offseason, should be acquiring an edge rusher. Zadarius Smith, with Zadarius Smith retiring, the priority for the Eagles this season before the trade deadline should be getting an edge rusher. That should be priority one. Now, I know the cornerback situation is bad, but if you have the right edge rusher, you can live with having Keely Ringo at cornerback 2 as long as Quinyon Mitchell is on the field. With Quinyon Mitchell on the field, you can live with the cornerback situation. With the right edge rusher and with Quinyon Mitchell on the field, we can live with the corner situation. We cannot live with the way this pass rush has looked, which struggled even with Zadarius Smith. The edge rush issue has to be more of a priority. Has to be priority one for Howie Roseman and this office ahead of the trade deadline. Has to be. Getting an edge rusher has to be priority one because of the way this pass rush has looked, and now with Zadarius Smith retiring. Honestly, the scheme looks so bad right now. Zadarius Smith retired because the scheme. That's how bad the scheme looks right now. Scheme looks so bad it made Zadarius Smith retire. But the edge rush issue, the pass rush has to be priority one because honestly, I feel like everything feeds off of the pass rush. Like, I feel like if you have a scary pass rush, I feel like having a scary pass rush is what helps your run stop defense. I feel like having a scary pass rush is what helps your secondary. Like, with the right pass rush, we can live with the cornerback situation. The Eagles defense proved that in 2022. If you remember in 2022, the Eagles had by far the best D-line in the NFL. led the league in sacks that year. I believe put up historic amount of sacks that year. Now finishing top 3 all time in regards to sacks. Now, if you go back and look at that, if you look at that at those numbers, whenever the D line did not get a sack, the secondary was actually one of the worst secondaries in the NFL that year. The Eagles defense in 2022, that pass rush was so dominant, it disguised the flaws that were in the secondary. That was with James Bradbury. That was with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. That was with Darius Slay. That we had, and on paper, it looked good. But the pass rush for the Eagles was so dominant in 2022 that it disguised really how flawed the secondary was for the Eagles that year. Like I said, that Eagles D-line led the league in sacks that year. They finished top 3 all-time in sacks that year. But whenever the Eagles did not get a sack, the secondary actually had the worst success rate in the NFL. The secondary had the worst success. The Eagles secondary had one of the worst success rates, had one of the worst coverage rates in the NFL. The same year, the defensive line led the league in all categories, especially sacks. That should show you how important a pass rush is. The Eagles pass rush needs to be priority 1 for this defense this offseason. Because with the right pass rush, we can live with the current cornerback situation. We can live with the lack in depth that position currently has. Because a pass rush can make up for that. If we have the right pass rush and we're getting to a quarterback within 2 to 2.5 seconds, that helps the secondary. A quarterback won't have time to expose that hole at the cornerback 2 position if he's too busy being pressured by the D line. A quarterback won't have time to make that play, won't have time to make that decision if the pass rush is doing its job right. The Eagles defense proved that in 2022. In 2022, they had the most dominant D-line in the NFL, one of the most dominant D-lines of all time, putting up historic sack numbers. That was also the same year the Eagles had one of the worst secondaries statistically. Because if you go back and look at it, whenever the Eagles D-line did not get a sack, the secondary struggled. So if we have the right pass rush this year, if we're able to shore up the right pass rush this year, it'll make up for that huge hole we have at cornerback 2. And honestly, looking at some of the guys that might be on the table this year, that might be on the trade block, I'm looking at Trey Hendrickson, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Jalen Phillips as prime targets for this Eagles team right now. Howie Roseman should be targeting those 3 guys and in that order. I know originally I said I thought Jalen Phillips should be more of a target than Kayvon Thibodeau, but I changed my mind. I'm flipping that. But looking at Trey Hendrickson should definitely be a target for Howie Roseman this season. Talking about the reigning sack leader, a defensive player of the year candidate, an all-pro caliber edge rusher. Trey Hendrickson would do so much to boost this defense. There's no question, especially in the absence of Zadarius Smith, we need someone of Trey Hendrickson's caliber in rushing the passer. A D-line with Jalen Carter, with a healthy Nolan Smith, and with a veteran Trey Hendrickson, who we should be able to afford to pay, could be scary and could be exactly what this defense needs to turn the season around. Trey Hendrickson should be a prime target for Howie Roseman and the front office. I honestly think, though, another perfect target for Howie Roseman would be Kayvon Thibodeau. Another perfect target for Howie Roseman in addressing the pass rush would be Kayvon Thibodeau. It's rumored the Giants might be looking to trade him to allow them to open up more of a solidified role for Abdul Carter, you know, who would be alongside Brian Burns, of course. If that's true, if the Giants do plan on trading Kayvon Thibodeau, or if they are willing to trade Kayvon Thibodeau, Howie Roseman should be aggressive in that deal. Howie Roseman should be very aggressive in acquiring Kayvon Thibodeau. And honestly, I could make the argument to say that Kayvon Thibodeau should be a bigger target for Howie Roseman than Trey Hendrickson because of what I think Kayvon Thibodeau could do for this Eagles defense, who I think he could be on this Eagles defense. If we're looking at Kayvon Thibodeau, I think if the Giants trade Kayvon Thibodeau, which was kind of the ongoing rumor after they drafted Abdul Carter, if they go through with that trade, we would now be getting a Kayvon Thibodeau who would have a chip on his shoulder, who would be playing like he has something to prove after being replaced by a rookie. We would be bringing a guy who has already been playing with an attitude all season. We would be bringing a guy like that to a contending team with already a formidable D-line. We would be bringing a guy like that who would now have even more attitude towards an opposing team, especially in the playoffs. Like, I feel like Howie Roseman acquiring Kayvon Thibodeau in a trade would have a similar impact as bringing in Saquon Barkley did. I feel like bringing in Kayvon Thibodeau would provide a similar boost to the defense the way bringing in Saquon Barkley provided a boost to the offense. Both guys were from New York. Both guys were playmakers. Obviously, Saquon Barkley being a higher tier at his position than Kayvon Thibodeau is at his. But still both playmakers. Still both talented. Kayvon Thibodeau is one of the most talented edge guys in the NFL right now. He's only 26. He doesn't have a history of being injury prone. And this year, he's been playing like he already has something to prove. If the Giants were to trade Kayvon Thibodeau to the Eagles, that mindset, that prove it to yourself and prove it to the league mentality would only increase inside of Kayvon. An Eagles defense with a something to prove, gotta have it mentality of Kayvon Thibodeau could be scary this year. That could be an instant switch for this defense. A D-line with Kayvon Thibodeau, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Nolan Smith could easily be the best D-line in the NFL this year. Easily. And honestly, Kayvon Thibodeau would be the perfect fit for this D-line because of the attitude that he naturally has. Kayvon Thibodeau has always played with an attitude. But this year, with the Giants drafting Abdul Carter, you've seen that attitude intensify. He's playing more aggressive against the run than he has in the past. He's coming off the line and he's coming off the ball more violent than he has. He's rushing the passer with a sense of urgency, with more of a sense of urgency than what we've seen in the past. I think if you bring that guy to Philly, whose mentality would only increase in that regard after being replaced in New York, that's exactly what this D-line needs right now. That's exactly what this D-line needs right now. And then I would say number 3 on that list in terms of targets would be Jalen Phillips. You know, he's an all-around talented pass rusher. You know, he's a younger guy. Before his injuries, he was dependable against the run. But on the downside, the reason why I have him at number 3 is because he's coming off of 2 major injuries, Achilles, ACL, and this year he hasn't looked great against the run. Still looks good against the pass, But if I had to choose between Trey Hendrickson, Kayvon Thibodeau, or Jalen Phillips, I'm not choosing Jalen Phillips because I think he is less of a run stopper than what Trey Hendrickson has proven to be, and definitely what Kayvon Thibodeau has proven to be. I honestly think Kayvon Thibodeau might be the best choice in terms of trade targets for this Eagles team because of just his all-around skill. I think he's better against the run than Trey Hendrickson and Jalen Phillips, and I think he has a higher ceiling as a pass rusher because of his age. In the right situation, with the talent that Kayvon Thibodeau has, I think Kayvon could honestly be a defensive player of the year candidate. Not this year, just because of, obviously timing, but moving down the line, he definitely could. A full season on this defense with Kayvon Thibodeau, a full season on this defense in this unit, Kayvon Thibodeau could be a defensive player of the year candidate one day. I definitely think Kayvon Thibodeau should be the highest, the biggest draft target for Howie Roseman in this front office. But whatever you do not trade A.J. Brown. Howie Roseman, you got to make something happen. Do whatever you got to do. But nothing is worth trading A.J. Brown. Now, looking at the Vikings, I got to say this real quick. Looking at this Vikings game, I am horrified of seeing Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison without Quinion Mitchell. Even with Quinion Mitchell, I am horrified to see the numbers that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison put up against the secondary. Vic Fangio, we got to play as little man coverage as possible because of how this cornerback situation looks right now. If we go heavy man against Minnesota on Sunday, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison are going to have a field day, whether it's Carson Wentz or J.J. McCartney throwing the football. Whether it's J.J. or Carson Wentz back there, this passing game is going to have a field day if we are going heavy man, trying to send extra pressure against the quarterback. I am horrified to see how these corners hold up against this receiver duo in Minnesota. Even with Quinion Mitchell on the field, all the quarterback has to do is throw the other way. But that's all we got for today's edition of No Shame with Shane. If you haven't already, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And I'll be back later on with more shameless takes.